Shalom. Welcome to Eretz Israel. It's Erev Shabbat, the last Shabbat of the year. It certainly is a time for regathering all the sparks of the year. The sparks, of course, are little capsules of desire. We want to focus our desire all towards, of course, the source of our desire and to complete the link between man and God, because the link is through desire. God's desire for us and our desire for him creates a spiritual link that will never be broken and that sustains the entire creation. Today we're asking a question that I hear all the time. I've heard it for 35 years at least, and it's the kind of question that keeps demanding an answer, but the answer refines you as you ask the question. And so, who is the Messiah? Who is Mashiach? And is that really the question? And on top of that question, people ask, well, who is the tzaddik of the generation? Because we're also told in Torah study to seek out the tzaddik of the generation, the righteous man, the leader of all the leaders. Because there's a hierarchy in religious practice, just like there's a hierarchy in the army, just like there's a hierarchy in government, or in business. There's always the decisor, the person that sits at the top of the pyramid. It's kind of pointy up there, and it's alone. And all the people below the structure that create the body of whatever that body was created to do, whether it's govern people, or govern an army, or govern a business. And so this is true in the spiritual realm as well. Because the developmental structure of going from one to many, which is described in the Torah in many ways, the holy people and the 70 nations, Moses and the 70 elders, the Hebrew language, the holy tongue, and the 70 archetypal languages, this 1 to 70 relationship is a correlation you could see throughout spiritual life. And we are extractions, and we are in the pyramid somewhere. Now, if you don't like where you're in the pyramid, well, you got to get to work. But who is Messiah? And who is the Tzaddik Ador? Well, the Talmud tells us, Mashiach da Moshe, Moshe da Mashiach. That Moses is the Mashiach and the Mashiach is Moses. In his time, Moses was Mashiach. And every generation has a Moses who is the Mashiach of that generation. Okay, we see that Noah was the Mashiach of his generation because he saved the people by building an ark. He saved the human race by building an ark. King David, King Solomon, each had an aspect of the Mashiach because they did the work of the Mashiach and they were anointed as kings of the Jewish people, but their work didn't quite finish the job. Moses was the Mashiach of his generation because he took the people out of Egypt and saved them from all the terrible things that were happening there. And we see that Rashi in the beginning of the Torah tells us that the Ruach Elohim, Merachevet al Penei Hamayim, the Spirit of God that hovers above the waters, he tells us the waters of the waters of the Torah. And that Spirit that hovers above the water of the Torah is the Spirit of Messiah. So we clearly are told over and over it is a multi-generational being. It is a soul that goes from generation to generation. We have to kind of loosen up our grip on our idea of time and the idea of how a soul moves in time. Loosen up our grip and let go of our previous understanding, because our previous understanding wasn't based on the teachings of the masters. It was assumptions that we made because that's how the mind works. When we don't know something, we assume something. Until we learn it, and then we say, oh, it's not that way. I see it now. It makes more sense. That this soul of Messiah keeps coming. And it was called Moses in the generation of Moses. And it's still a nomiker of the concept. A name of the concept. It keeps appearing. So now when people on the streets of Jerusalem ask me, well, who's Messiah? Who's the tzaddik of the generation? I say, well, the Lubavitcher Rebbe was the accepted tzaddik of the generation, this generation. Now he passed away A long time ago, well, a long time, there's no long, in 28 years is not a long time in Judaism. However, until somebody else clearly takes on that role and has that power and has that spirit, that he's able to stay on his feet 24 hours, giving out dollars and blessings and changing people's lives with his words, then we'll wait to see who the next tzaddik of the door is. And is he the Mashiach? Well, right now we can't really say that he is, because he didn't build the temple, because that's our definition. Will he come back from the dead and build the temple? Well, that makes a lot of people uncomfortable, that idea. That idea has already been used in another religion. We're not taught that the same person comes back, because a person is a composite. Your external soul is who you are in your everyday life. Your internal soul, your higher soul, is a spark from the tree of life through which you derive your power. And you can receive new souls all the time based on your deeds. So who is the Mashiach? Who is the Moshe of the generation? Well, we don't know for sure, but we're going to rely on our past assumptions because of the evidence that the Rebbe brought into the world and the great things that he did. And we'll see. Rabbi Nachman said 200 years before the Lubavitcher Rebbe was people said he's the Messiah, and then he passed away, and it was a big controversy. But 200 years before that, Rabbi Nachman said, there will be nothing new between me and Mashiach. The only difference will be that they'll listen to the Mashiach and they don't listen to me. Now, he was a Rebbe, a great Rebbe, a young man who died young, and he was at 38, and he lived in the Ukraine and visited Eretz Israel. He wasn't a world traveler per se, but he traveled a lot around Ukraine, which is a pretty good space. And he was known amongst the locals, but he wasn't what you would call world famous. And certainly the whole world wasn't going to listen to him. And the whole world wasn't listening to Jews then back at all. They were listening to Napoleon. So, and of course, Russia, they were listening to the Tsar at the time. So, wait a minute now. So, in Breslov, they say that nothing new is going to come until Mashiach comes, and he's going to extend the Rebbe's teachings into the world. And in Chabad, they're saying, well, the Rebbe was the Heskat, the potential Mashiach, but yet we're still having to wait for some big events to happen. And you say, well, this man died. How can people say a person who left his body? How can you say a person who left his body is alive in this world? Well, the rabbi said it in the Talmud, so we trust them a little more than we trust our New Age teachers of today, the sages of 2,000 years ago. They said it like this: Gadolim tzadikim emitatam min chayehem. That the tzadikim are greater in their death than they are in life. Now, what does that mean? Well, the parameters of your greatness in life, what are they? How much influence you have, how much money you have, how much people listen and act upon what you say, how much good you bring into the world, how much you establish and fix in the human experience of this world. There's many parameters that we could call the greatness of a righteous person. How many schools you built, how many shuls you built, how many people learn Torah because of your teaching. Those are all measures of greatness. Okay. Well, other measures of greatness are how far you can travel, how fast you can get there, how much you remember. So, being greater in your death implies that the tools of life that we need to be here, our bodies, our breath, food and drink, a little shelter from the storm, they don't need those things. So they're greater. Why? Because the body is a constrictive vessel. It is a spaceship that you cannot leave, or that you can leave, but you cannot get back into it very easily. And so the tzaddikim, they have greater power because they have greater influence to move between the physical and the spiritual. Now, before the Lubavitcher Rebbe passed away, he made a Beit Din and a decision in front of judges saying, I will not accept my portion in the world to come until the Mashiach comes, but until then I will stay in the lower realm, the spiritual of the physical. In other words, I will stay with my people, I will stay with the Jewish people, I will stay with my chassidim, and I will continue to influence the world without the need of a body. So based on some of those types of teachings, the Hasidim of Chabad, Adayin, they still say that the Rebbe could be, and a lot of them say he is Mashiach, but we can say could be, because we don't know, because the Talmud says in Sanhedrin that Mashiach can come from the living or the dead. Well, if you think about it, everybody comes from the dead, because a soul without a body is called dead, even though they're alive up above. So everybody's coming from the realm of death into the realm of life, back into the realm of what we call death, which is really real life. The land of the living is heaven. As King David said, I will walk in the land of the living. He meant in the world to come. So, wait a minute. If the tzaddikim are greater without their bodies, that should give us a little sigh, if we can get that concept, because it means it's true for us as well. That means that the influence on our body, it affects our ability to interact with the spiritual realm. That is, to influence. The more we're attached to the physical, the less spiritual influence we have. The more we're attached to the spiritual, the less physical influence we need. And not being bound to a body means you're not bound to time and space. You're allowed entry into the realm where you can go forward and backward in time and space. Breslov comes along and says, well, we have a concept called the seventh beggar. There's a great story by Rabbi Nachman. It's called the seven beggars, but only 6 appear in the story, and the 7th is not told about. And at the end of the story tells us that the story of the 7th beggar will be revealed when the Messiah comes. Well, if you look in Tikkun Zohar, the 69th chapter, it tells us about a beggar without legs. And his story is quite an amazing story, because he meets 2 great sages who are known to be the sages of the generation. And the beggar is on the ground. He's on the floor. His legs don't work. He's in the mouth of a cave. And they say to him, how are you? Would you like to have Shabbos with us? He says, no, well, would you like to have Shabbos with me? They say, well, how can you have Shabbos here alone in the cave? How are you going to get home? He says, I'll be home before you can get there. And he says a divine name, and he flies off. And they're like, we got to follow this guy. And he takes them into a transcendental realm, into a cave where there's 300 sages sitting at a table. That's a big table, filled with all the Ma'adanei Melech, as they're called, the delicacies of this world. And they're all like in shock. And this Rebbe, he goes up to the head of the table, and he sits down, and he strips off his physical body, the one that they see, the body where the legs don't work. And now he's a being of brilliant light, with a crown on his head, and everybody is listening to every word he says, and everything he does, they're watching. And suddenly these 2 great sages realize that they don't know anything about the upper realm. And there's this beggar who was on the floor of a cave, who's now in another cave somewhere else in another realm, and he's the master of that realm. So in Breslov, the teaching is that the 7th beggar will be the story of the Messiah. Well, how do we know that? Because each beggar before has another dysfunction or another problem of disability. The first beggar is blind, the second beggar is deaf, the third beggar is mute, the fourth beggar has a bent back, the fifth beggar has big, is twisted. Each one has a malady, a problem with his body, down to the hands, and then we're left, after the hands, what's left? Well, the feet. But the beggar with the hands that don't work, well, he's the sixth one. So they say that the seventh is the story, part of the story that Rabbi Nachman didn't tell because he didn't want to give us the whole future over, because we receive these stories as having the prophetic properties. And so we see over in the Zohar, though, it tells us this story of the seventh beggar, of this other beggar. And if you wish to, you can connect the two because they fit together very well. Being that this is the beggar who doesn't have feet that work, but yet he can fly and be anywhere that he needs to be. Meaning that the seventh beggar, i.e. the Messiah, i.e. the tzaddik of the last generation, before the final redemption and the building of the third temple and the redemption of all souls from the tyranny of the body and the tyranny of human political systems and the tyranny of bad medicine and bad food and bad advice, that will be the messianic redemption in its completion. Okay. So you see, Judaism gives you different windows on an idea. There's a Chabad take on Messiah, there's a Breslev take on Messiah, and then there's, of course, the Mekubalim of Jerusalem and other places that all gather in teachings from many places. And individuals have their ideas too. In the 61st Torah of Likutei Moharan, the Rebbe says that tzaddik is the foundation of the world, just like Har Bayit is the foundation stone of the physical world. The foundation stone being the stone from which all materiality, or mutzak. Mutzak means to materialize. And that corresponds to the bedrock of the planet, which if you look at, if you've ever seen one of these beautiful images where they show you the planet Earth and they remove all the water, and what's left? It looks like a giant tack. Not a tack, we used to play tacks, right? And it looks like this giant rock that has big extensions or arms. And, when we were kids, you used to play tacks. Maybe a few people did that. It was before the iPhone, trust me. People had to look for, different level of fun. And so the earth is these pillars of stone. And we call them the tectonic plates. And, of course, they're resting on a pool of a molten rock, which is called the magma. And then, we go into the geology of the structure of the earth, and we end up at this iron core, which creates this solid mass of magnetism that surrounds the planet. You move the oceans, and you have these pillars. And they're called the Shiva Yesodei Olam, the 7 foundations of the world. And one of them is in Jerusalem. And that's called the Even Shtiyah, the foundation stone. And Rabbi Nachman comes along and says, that's the tzaddik. He's the foundation stone at the level of soul, just like that rock is the foundation stone at the level of materialism, stone, rock, earth. And the Beit HaMikdash is the foundation temple, which gathers in the light for the soul of the tzaddik, who is the Mashiach, who gathers in that light. So you see, all these concepts are working together. And the foundation stone draws all souls. It doesn't make a distinction between Jew or Christian or Muslim, or Hindu or Buddhist. The distinction is how much you're connected to that energy, how much you are drawn to Jerusalem, how much you are drawn to God. That's your little magnet with the big magnet. Now, you don't like your You don't like your magnet? Well, make it bigger. Change, do the work and exchange it for a bigger magnet. And you'll be pulled right downtown to Jerusalem. And that's why you have a thing called Jerusalem syndrome, by the way. And I've been working with this for 30 years. The people that have this idea that they're the Messiah, or that they're King David, or that they're King Solomon, or whoever they think that, whatever they are, so it's always some histrionic figure from the past, because that's part of the histrionic personality disorder that's woven into what we call Jerusalem syndrome, which is when people have very sensitive spiritual souls, they come to Jerusalem, they get pulled by the magnet so strong, so hard, that they suddenly are no longer themselves, but they're this histrionic figure. Now obviously that's a very quick definition or idea about it. But the point is, it makes sense because they're drawn here, because this is the place to be drawn, because the foundation stone is there. And that's why everybody's asking, who's Messiah? Who's the Messiah? Who's the tzaddik of the generation? And Rabbi Nachman comes along and says like this: that's not the question, who the Messiah is. It's not about personalities. It's not about this guy, this rabbi, or that rabbi. When you do the work, you get the label. But don't put the label on people before they do the work. The question Rabbi Nachman says to ask in Likutei Moharan, his master work, is, am I helping the Messiah come, or am I preventing it? That's all. Am I blocking the river, or am I helping the river to flow? Am I removing stones from the riverbank, or am I adding more boulders to the stream of that divine light? So that's an individual question that cannot be answered by anyone but yourself. And it should not be answered by anybody else. If anybody else tries to answer it for you, your eyebrows should go up and your mouth should close, and you should be quiet and respectful and patient and say thank you very much and keep on walking. Because the only place you're going to get your truest answer is from yourself, from your own soul, because that's your magnet, that's your spark, and that's what's drawing you there in the first place, to the question. And if you're Christian and you believe that JC's the man, well, you got to work through that. Or you don't. And you can believe whatever you want. But there's a level of, the Rabbi Natan of Breslov, Rabbi Nachman's main student, tells us that he says in his prayers, who am I to give advice to another person? I can barely give advice to myself. And he's the one who wrote down these thousands of pages of the Rebbe's Torah and his own Torah. Likutei Halachot is a masterwork unto itself, which I should have merit to be able to share with you on Facebook and YouTube and all the outlets. And many great teachers are giving it over daily. You can find it online. Likutei Halachot of Rabbi Natan is taking the Shulchan Aruch and applying the principles of Breslov Chassidus to the laws of the Shulchan Aruch, which every Jew is advised to take a look at. We don't want to force it down anybody's throat. But you see, giving advice is a very dangerous thing. And I only do it when I have to, because I feel, as a therapist and as a rabbi, that people are coming to me for that. But if people don't ask, there's no vessel to receive. Because the vessel to hold the light is the question. And the answer to the question is the light. So you need a vessel, a question, and you need a light, an answer. And if someone doesn't ask the question, it is not your job to try to give them the light without being able to hold it. You will cause damage to yourself and others. Now, many people, they just don't know. They want to know, who's the Messiah? Who is the Tzaddik Ador? How do I deal with this? How do I get up and go to work tomorrow? People are asking questions at every level. And the answer is, if you don't know, then you have more work to do till you do know. Because it's inherent that you should know. It is inherent in the human being that we have a connection to the source of all information. Every person. God is completely equanimical, and he's fair. God is fair. He is equally accessible to every person if we're willing to do the work. The work, of course, is cleansing ourselves enough that we can receive from our true spark within. And when you get that answer, Ki lo od ikanef morecha, people will no longer grab the hem of the garment of their teacher. Tell me, what's the answer? Help me, save me, fix me. Because people will get their answer. They'll have their answer. They'll discover it within. And that's why it says Mashiach comes like the bite of a scorpion. As fast as a scorpion can nip you when you're walking through the junk pile. It's happened, right? You're on some old blanket and there is a scorpion, and if your hand's in the wrong place or your foot's in the wrong, he's going to hit you before you even know it. That fast, you will get that knowledge of the spark of Mashiach in you that will solve your questions, that will give you your answers, that will bring your divine self into fruition, into, I want to say floration, but I don't think that's the right word, to flower, right? That will bring your soul, to make the flower of your soul blossom. Okay, that's nice. However, until you have that level, which we're all working for, one way or another, even if we don't know about it, we're working at it because it's coming on us. It's part of the fabric of creation. This upswell of divine energy is going to overwhelm the oceans of the mind very soon. But until then, we need to find someone who does. Find someone who can guide us, who can answer our questions. You know, the rabbis say that before a wise man teaches, he sifts his words with 13 sifters. Now, my wife likes to make challah. You know, I've never seen anybody sift their dough, their flour with 13 sifters. That's a lot of sifting. Can you imagine that you before you say something, you stop and pause 13 times to check if your words are the right words? Well, there's a reason the rabbis say 13. 13 sifters of your words are 13 vessels, 13 midot, they're called, of rachamim. 13 types of mercy that were revealed to Moses at Mount Horeb when he received the Torah. Those 13 attributes, we call them, of mercy. That when we sift our words, we've got to filter them through the vessels of mercy. And if you do that sifting, you'll come to the right word, and the right advice, and the right direction, and the right insight, and the right relationships. And you'll know how to get rid of the wrong ones too. So we need this blessing. We need the blessing of knowing that there is a knower, as the Rambam says, and there is a knowledge, the knowledge that we all need every day to function in this world. The knowledge of the big questions like who is Messiah, and the big questions like, well, am I blocking the river of messianic light, or am I helping it flow faster? And we get that big pause. And we get that easy feeling. I can do this. I can be here. I can be in this world. I can celebrate this world. I can celebrate the Creator and His creation and all the people. That's each other. So we should all celebrate the Shabbat, celebrate the coming New Year. We'll be talking about Rosh Hashanah, the coming New Year, on Saturday night and Sunday, Erev Rosh Hashanah. And then, of course, afterwards we have the great day of atonement. And then we have the 7 days of the festival of Sukkot. And the 8th day is Shmini Atzeret, the day of the Simcha of the Torah. So there's so much coming in this month. You know, we've got to really be on our game. We should all be blessed with that faith in ourselves and the faith in the one who gave us ourselves. Because they're one. God bless you all. Shabbat Shalom.